Hello and welcome back. I'm Randy Bueller, joined by the victorious Kevin Crone with the smile on his face. You got to be feeling pretty good.
Yes, I absolutely feel great. I couldn't say otherwise, of course.
So 2-0 victory over Bob Maher. Talk to me. The highlight for us, I was in the booth with Rich Shea, and we were just loving the 1BR deck.
Well, I mean, obviously I've played that deck before. I played it at Champs. I've tweaked it. It's been through a couple of iterations since then, and the hilarity just keeps going. I had Toxic Deluge in my sideboard at Champs, and at the subsequent events that I played after that, and in fact, in the VSL, I had Toxic Deluge in my sideboard.
Right, it was a direct deck then.
Yeah, right. I was disappointed though with Deluge every time I drew it. And so I went kind of back to my history. I've got notes and these kind of things from the past brainstorming, and I came upon Fire Covenant, and I thought, okay, come on. Fire Covenant must be the correct card for this deck.
It was spectacular. Absolutely great. So yeah, Fire Covenant was amazing. Kolaghan's Command is, I think, a new addition to the deck.
No, I had Kolaghan's Command at Champs. Okay. Can you hear me but not see me at this point?
Yeah, you're not moving, but your audio still seems to be working from my side.
I don't know what happened to my video. I'll fix that in a sec. However, yes, I had two Kolaghan's Commands, one main, one side at Champs, and I've stuck with that. I feel the card is quite good. It's obviously harkens back to Rack and Ruin against Shops, but it also has other applications against other blue-based tempo kind of creature mid-range decks that I've found that I really enjoy. And I mean, I borrowed technology from Modern and Legacy.
Oh yeah, look, that card's been doing great work in Legacy for seemingly years now in the so-called check pile. Great card.
That is precisely where I got it, and it does exactly what I want to do in those kind of Snapcaster mirrors that become frequently grindy. So.
Yeah, it looked great against the Shops deck too.
Well, I mean, it's mostly a Rack and Ruin there, which is what you want it to be. Not always, but mostly.
All right, but now it's time for our second match. So Bob Maher lost to you, but he's still got some magic left to play. It is time for a couple of Hall of Famers to throw down. It's time for Eric Froehlich to take on Bob Maher. All right, here we go. And wow, Eric Froehlich did the same thing you did. He put his workshop deck into the 8 slot. He's planning to play it first. And Bob Maher, once again, gets to play Oath against workshops. Now, it didn't work out great against you. You rolled him. But
well, I mean, I feel that his deck rolled him. I mean, he got some very unfortunate sequences against me.
All right, Eric on a mulligan. Now that hand's got, I don't know quite how to sequence it, but it's got plenty going on.
Well, I think it's very important to recognize now that Eric knows he's up against Oath. And game 1, that is very hard to mulligan into a hand that's quote-unquote good against Oath.
That's a great point.
Workshop deck.
That's a great point. So Eric, I mean, we weren't going to tell him he can't watch. So Eric had the chance to watch you and Bob play. So I've just published all the deck lists now. Eric and Bob each have each other's deck lists. You can see them in chat with the deck lists command. I mean, I guess if I'd planned ahead, maybe we could have kept the match 3 deck secret, since neither you or Bob actually revealed your third deck. Whatever. Right. They're just all public now. Bob on the play is another crucial difference from the match against you. Against you, you had won the roll, and he wasn't able to get the Oath out quite this quickly. This is really bad for Eric, right? He's basically down to hoping this Oath somehow decks Bob Maher.
Yeah, that's basically Eric's only out. It's worth noting that he was actually probably pretty pleased with his draw because it had Chalice that he could cast on 1. If Bob has anything other than Mox Land Oath, Eric gets to play turn 1 Chalice at 2, and that was certainly his plan. Now his hope is to just put out as much of a force, I think, as he can and try to race, to your point, assuming that Bob's Oaths are subpar.
Bob's creature set is, I didn't study the list. I think it's 2 Inferno Titans and a Griselbrand, and the Griselbrand is in his hand.
Yeah, that would be my assumption. That's kind of the standard Kelly Oath list coming out from Champs, and even though I can't confirm or deny it, I haven't actually studied the lists. I would assume that's the case. Now, Eric has to be just banking on the fact that these oaths aren't going to be good enough. But I think if double Inferno Titan is coming up, Eric is probably in serious trouble.
Well, you do what you can.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to go Hanger back into Chalice. Is he going to Chalice? Chalice is 2.
He Chalices 2 because this Kelly Oath deck frequently has multiple main deck Ancient Grudges, and it's just the best thing he can do, I think.
Makes sense.
It's unfortunate that it strands so much of his action, though, specifically that Steel Overseer and many creatures like it.
Well, you do what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
There is the Inferno Titan. 3rd card down. 50 cards left for Bob to work with.
That's pretty optimistic for Bob at this point, then. It's going to be very hard for Eric to come back starting his next turn with no creatures in play and one in his hand he can't cast. And sadly, Chief of the Foundry has 3 toughness, which is exactly the amount that Inferno Titan likes to see.
Fair. Yeah, I'm not even sure Bob would activate Oath a second time, even if given the chance. Whoa.
I think you're probably
now we
right.
know he won't. I'm pretty sure that is... I'm going to look up the actual deck list. I'm pretty sure he just drew his last creature. Like, I think the one Inferno Titan can probably win the game from here, and he wouldn't have risked Oathing out of fear of decking himself. Yeah, 2 Inferno Titan, 1 Grizzlebrand. Oh, he has a Trinket Mage. No, that's the sideboard. My bad.
Okay.
He's more creatures in the sideboard, but that is it for the main deck.
Eric is doing what he can here. If he's planning to play Chief of the Foundry, he really should have played it pre-combat, but that's such a minor thing that, yeah, okay.
Eric's
So
like,
he's getting in the chip, the chip damage and then packing it in.
He can't
I think
beat a
rightly
single
so.
Inferno Titan, so...
Yeah. If he had drawn a Metamorph right there, I think he might have played it out a little bit, but
Interesting.
Still pretty ugly. Yes, looking at the sideboard that Bob is presenting here, it looks very much like Brian Kelly's list from Champs, all the way down to Gisela and Stormbreath. Carnage Tyrant is a fun addition, however, for those grindy blue matchups. And he's bringing in the usual suspects here. I'm pretty sure that Eric knows what Bob is up to. He might not predict Carnage Tyrant in particular, but it wouldn't come in this matchup anyway.
Yeah, he's got the list. It's just a question of how he's going to sideboard. Looks like Eric has got max Grafdigger's Cage.
As I would expect.
All 4 of those come in, of course.
And 3 Metamorphs, which is very common in the modern shop lists. That helps you fight a resolved Oath creature.
Looks like 2 Ratchet Bombs.
Yep. Also pretty standard to, especially on the play, you have a 3-turn window where if they don't have an aggressive enough Oath, you can get a Ratchet Bomb up to 2 and then be somewhat protected. Obviously, that play has issues with all the removal in the Oath deck, but still, it is one path to victory.
Yeah, and you see Bob has Ancient Grudge times not 1, not 2, but 3.
Mm-hmm. And Sorcerous Spyglass, which ironically, you might think that Sorcerous Spyglass was a little bit underpowered against workshops. You can shut off some of the activated abilities on creatures, but it works on Wasteland, and post-sideboard it works on Ratchet Bomb too, which can be a bit of a backbreaker if they invest in a turn 1 Ratchet Bomb, tick it up to 1, and then you Spyglass it to prevent it from destroying Oath.
All right. What do we think?
We're missing a card in Bob's hand at the moment, but from what I can see of the 6...
Whatever. I'm keeping those 6.
Yeah. I mean, it's a keepable hand, but it's also not an Oath hand yet.
Wait, why is there a mental misstep in his hand?
Because of Grafdigger's Cage.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, this is one of those matchups where you leave the missteps in. So Bob's plan here is turn 1 Brainstorm into an Oath package by forcing Eric's first threat, maybe misstepping a cage. Eric's plan, however, is to draw none of his sideboard cards and hope that maybe turn 1 Ravager, turn 2 Lodestone, followed up by a Metamorph whenever an Oath creature comes in is good enough. There are certainly games where it can be good enough, but it's real tempting to mulligan this one. That's a very fast. It's not like an Inspector hand for Eric, but it's still quite aggressive. And combined with a Metamorph to disrupt, quote unquote, disrupt Bob's plans, it could be fast enough.
Yeah, I think the Metamorph makes it keepable for me.
Yeah. And it looks like Eric agrees. One nice feature of Bob's hand, in addition to the Force of Will, is the fact that he has those fetches. This Kelly Oath list typically has only a single basic island to ensure yourself against wastelands.
Steel Overseer. Now, you talked about Bob's plan being to force the first couple of threats. Does that count?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I don't think it does, no. Especially since now you can prioritize your forces on their subsequent creatures even more narrowly.
Fourth land is the draw for Bob.
That wasn't great, but if this hand evolves into a Jace game, then he's going to need it eventually.
Yeah, not great. I agree, but
he's got Brainstorm, so there's kind of no dead card, really. Oh, wow. Foundry Inspector was actually really good for Eric. Agreed. Now he can put, if he wants, 3 creatures into play, which suddenly makes this Overseer much better. This is a tempting Force of Will target. Especially since no Cage came down on 1. It would be a really, really epic read on Bob's part to think that Eric still had a Cage.
Right, he just wasted a mana on turn 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way he's got a Cage. I think you can pitch the misstep. He's gonna maybe the Jace. The Jace is expensive. It's not crazy.
I agree. It's not crazy. And
he decided to pitch the Jace.
After all, Eric could still just draw a Cage. So
also true. So instead of being able to follow up with a Ravager and a Ballista, Eric has to settle for just the Ravager.
As it stands right now, this is a good place for Eric, but we're pending a Brainstorm resolution here, and that could change the whole landscape of this game. Either Oath of Druids or I think Ancient Grudge would really swing this thing in Bob's favor, I believe.
Yeah, you might as well Brainstorm as a response.
You were planning to do it end of turn anyway, I think.
Right. I guess maybe you can talk yourself into wanting to Force a Will the Ravager, so no reason not to get the information now. Eric's used up his land drop.
Yep. And
Tropical,
seeing the creatures he's announced, there's no way that Eric was sandbagging a Mox from turn 1.
Right. Here's the Brainstorm.
So Bob wants to see any number of 2-mana spells.
Fire Spout? Fire Spout seems good. Oh, he can't quite cast it yet.
No, by the time he does, by the time he does, the Fire Spout's not going to be good enough. Might be a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-1, but whenever it resolves, it will still leave a creature in play.
Crazy. Yeah, so with no fast mana, that Fire Spout is a turn 3 play, and Steel Overseer is going to race it.
And because Eric's draw was so fast, Bob didn't have the luxury of waiting until his second main phase to Brainstorm.
Agreed.
So now he's forced to draw that 5th land, which looks very unattractive. Now Bob's really on a shuffle and hope situation here.
True story.
This Lodestone Golem is going to be out of Fire Spout range by the time it comes around. Is Eric reconsidering whether or not he wants Lodestone Golem? Okay, he decided. I think it's the right choice, especially since Bob did not announce Oath that turn. Then he knows that Bob is on a totally different plan, and it usually involves multiple spells at this point. Lodestone Golem makes Rack and Ruin / Ancient Grudge that much harder to implement. And now Fire Spout is a turn 4 play for Bob.
Because of the Lodestone Golem. Good point. So, like you said, fetch, shuffle, and hope.
even if he drew Ancient Grudge right there, it would not have been amazing. It's ironic that Pearl actually makes Fire Spout go online this turn, but it's not that good. Yes, it removes. It could remove. Well, yeah. It all it could do really is destroy Overseer, and then Bob gets run over.
Yep.
And he knows it. Yep.
Looking to take 10. Nothing he could draw. He could have killed 1 creature that turn with his Fire Spout, but not worth it. On to game 3.
Interesting to see if anyone's sideboard plan adjusts here on the play versus draw. We haven't seen anyone make a change yet.
Eric moved his mouse straight to the submit deck button. Doesn't look like he's going to change it up.
So what is this, just head games amidst 2 Hall of Famers?
What, thinking? I mean, you got to pause and think. And we've had Bob playing all night. He might need to run to the restroom.
Oh, that's a fair point. And you give up too much value just by slamming the submit deck button right away, right?
Yeah.
You can't hemorrhage that much value.
All right, game 3. First match of the set. These guys are playing a best 2 out of 3 matches series.
Ooh, Eric has one of those can you keep a no-lander kind of draws. On the draw, I don't think you can. Really? Even though you could play a flurry of spells.
It's got a mana crypt in it.
I don't think you can keep that hand. I know it has Mana Crypt and it has Metamorph, but look what happens if you play out all those spells. You pass the turn with
Inspector, Thorn, and Sphere in play.
And only Mana Crypt for mana.
And Inspector.
Well, okay, fair enough. That's true. So you kind of have 3 mana. You could still put Metamorph on the stack. Yeah, I didn't account for that. Given that Inspector is part of the package, I think it's okay.
Yeah, take the Inspector out of that hand, and I kind of see your point. But I think the Inspector is good enough. In fact, he can go Inspector, Metamorph the Inspector, then play Thorn or Sphere.
I don't think that's part of your plan because of the role of Metamorph in this matchup. But you're right. I have a feeling that all things being equal, this is Lotus, Inspector, Mana Crypt, Ballista at 1, Thorn. But it has everything to do with what he draws, too.
I'm pretty sure you keep it.
Okay. Well, he did. He certainly did. Bob's hand is really interesting here because Dak is a huge threat in this matchup.
Yes.
But you're taking a risk that you can even put it onto the stack. And as you can tell from Eric's hand, he's going to have a hard time doing so. Ooh, that Sapphire he got helped a lot, though.
It was off the preordain, yeah. He saw a dig through time and a mock Sapphire, put the dig on the bottom and put the Sapphire into play. Wow, Trinisphere.
Trinisphere is a little bit of a rub-in here. It's not the kind of card Eric wanted to draw with double Sphere already.
Fair.
Let's see if he executes then exactly what we said. I can't imagine him doing anything else, really. It's possible to get the Metamorph on the double Inspector line here, but I don't think that actually increases your odds of winning the game, especially when your opponent went Island Sapphire.
It gives you mana.
True. But to your prior point, almost all the cards he wants to draw are live draws with just Inspector plus Crypt.
I like Metamorph on Inspector.
Well, it looks like he's doing it.
It does look like he's doing it.
I'm genuinely surprised there because what does this facilitate for you? It facilitates you still just playing Ballista on 1 and Thorn this turn, right? It doesn't change what you can play. You just have an extra Inspector in play. The challenge.
That means your artifact spells are -2. It means you can play a Thorn for 0. He can't get the Ballista down. Like he said, 0 mana, but so he can play a Thorn or a Sphere.
He can play a Ballista on 1.
Oh, you're right. He can play a Ballista on 1.
My point is that there's really no difference between 3 and 4 mana spells in this matchup.
No, there is next turn when you play the Sphere on top of the Thorn.
Okay, that's fair. If playing this Sphere next turn is part of your plan, the challenge is that this turn with either path still allows Bob to announce Oath next turn, because that Seppin Inspector doesn't stop Oath from coming down right now. I'd much rather have 1 Inspector and a Metamorph in my hand in case things go south.
I like Eric's line. You got 7 power. You have the ability to keep casting spells.
Okay. Well, we're going to get to see how it plays out. Bob drew what might be the second best card he could have drawn in Ancient Grudge.
Forbidden Orchard is the mana, though?
Yep, he's agonizing about exactly that. Is there any way I should not just announce this Orchard and pass the turn? And I think he will probably conclude that it is his best line.
He literally can't play any of the spells in his hand except the Instant Speed Grudge.
This opens him up to Wasteland.
Does.
I think it's within Eric's range to have passed the turn while holding a Wasteland.
I don't know about that.
I think it is. I mean,
skipping a land drop?
Well, with the double Inspector play, to your point earlier, it's possible that a configuration of 2 cards in Eric's hand, like the last cards could be Wasteland and, say, a large creature, like a Lodestone. He couldn't have played a Lodestone in addition to all of that. So if his land was Wasteland, Lodestone, then he would have held the
top deck a relevant land, though.
No, you're not wrong. I do think it's within Eric's range.
All right.
But honestly, it's a low possibility either way. Bob is just wondering, is there any way I can even win this game if I play Underground Sea this turn? And I think the answer is no.
No, I think you have to play Orchard.
Yeah.
You have to play Orchard and say go.
Yep. Orchard pass, not giving Eric the token on your turn so it can attack you.
Agreed.
probably grudging on upkeep on one of the inspectors, wouldn't you think?
I might wait and see what happens.
But if you grudge on upkeep, you deny Eric Amanda. It's kind of like a Stone Rain and
But is the inspector really the thing you want to hit, though? He may feel like he needs to hit the Thorn.
That's a fair point. But if he doesn't get wasted, Dak is online through that Thorn next turn anyway. I mean, not knowing.
Not if there's another one coming.
Well, granted. But Bob has to play to his outs. Like, do you think Bob really can't beat a Wasteland this game? Can he?
Well, but he can put Eric. He can beat a Sphere. If he grudges Thorn.
If he grudges Thorn, that's fair. I see your point. And I mean, it's a lot easier. Beat is maybe the wrong word. He can resolve Dak next turn and take a tapped Inspector and then lose the Dak to the swing back. So
it is easy for me to say looking at Eric's hand, but
right.
I don't know which is better. I mean, honestly, grudging Crypt isn't absurd.
That's a fair point. If you think that...
I think he loses to the board if he grudges the Crypt. So, okay, he's on your line. He's going to hit the Inspector. He needs to slow down the beats, and he's decided if he's going to hit the Inspector, then yes, absolutely. Do it on upkeep so that Eric doesn't get the mana.
And this is another one of those scenarios where he's pretty sure Eric doesn't have a cage because it would have come down last turn in addition to everything else.
New Inspector.
That's reasonably good.
So Eric has to choose whether to play Sphere or Inspector?
Yes. This Inspector costs Sphere, 2. Yeah. So
or
one or the other.
Inspector, but
if he plays the Sphere, he's cutting himself off from the other 2 cards in his hand. It's worth noting.
But I think he's also making Bob's life more difficult.
Exactly. He knows that Bob is on flashing back Ancient Grudge, which with this second Sphere costs 3 mana, which is effectively a whole turn, and tapping Forbidden Orchard in the process, at least he would assume.
Right.
Also, Eric's clock is worth at least considering. He's got 5 damage this turn. Assuming Orchard is tapped next turn, it'll be 5 or 6 next turn. Oh, I'm sorry. I was counting the Spirit that was in play. It's 4 this turn, and then 5 next turn, and then lethal the turn after that, depending on how many Spirits and mana Eric draws.
Yeah, I don't know if
Eric
Eric
Spirit every turn. Yeah.
I don't know if Eric can afford to play the Sphere because his Inspector is probably what gets grudged in that world, and suddenly he's on 2-3 power worth of motley 1/1s to attack with, and he's flipping a Mana Crypt.
That's a reasonable point. That could go south for him, especially if Bob has something fortunate like a second Ancient Grudge.
And Bob chose to blow up the Inspector. Bob thought the Inspector was better than Thorn. Eric's got to at least consider that.
That's a good information. I hadn't considered that. From Bob's perspective, that is worse.
All right. Bob thought the Inspector was worse for him than the Thorn of Amethyst, and Eric can essentially add another Thorn equivalent.
And from Eric's perspective that Bob doesn't have Oath, which means putting him on a 2-turn clock to draw outs or an Oath is pretty strong.
Well, Eric knows the Grudge can get flashed back, so he's going to make that as expensive as possible. That also means this Mox Ruby costs 2.
The Ruby draw was actually very strong because it means he can cast it and still flash back Ancient Grudge through 2 spheres, which means now Bob has a path to Dak Faden.
Yep.
Now we're somewhat in a repeat of last turn's scenario. Does Bob grudge an Inspector on upkeep again? Knowing that he has the 5 mana now to pay for Dak through those double spheres. And that Eric missed his second land drop.
The fact that Eric hasn't played a land means I'm doubling down on the Inspector. Having hit 1 Inspector, I think you got to hit the second one now.
I think I agree with you.
Especially look at what it does to Eric's clock, right?
Definitely.
He attacked for 2 instead of 5.
Definitely.
Interesting game.
Yeah, I think Bob is just very thoroughly weighing all options right here to see if there's anything he's missing in terms of, do I lose to something if I let him untap, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
As most of us know, the only instant speed effect, aside from activating abilities that Workshops really plays, is Dismember, and that has no relevance in this matchup or in this scenario. So I would expect to see Bob pass the turn here again, and for things to play out just like they did last turn.
That's what I expect.
Unfortunately for Eric, he could draw a number of lands that would not even allow him to cast any spells next turn. They wouldn't be bad lands. Wasteland would be a pretty good effect on this board. But Eric would be in something of an agonizing position. Assuming his Inspector got shattered and he drew a Wasteland, would it be better to keep it to cast future spells, given how much mana pressure he's under now? I wouldn't want to be in Eric's position if he drew a Wasteland next turn. As it stands, though, for the moment, he's ahead on life, and he's doing 2 damage versus 1.5 damage for Bob. So Eric's winning the race, but...
Yeah, I do expect him to be able to outlast the Mana Crypt flips. Bob's got some Planeswalkers that are about to come online, though.
Also, unfortunately for Eric, that Trinisphere, because of the texture of this game, as soon as he drew it, I thought that's going to be a dead card this whole game, and it turns out to be true. Unless the next card Bob draws is another Ancient Grudge, at which point you probably would see those spheres start to disappear. That Trinisphere is probably going to have almost no impact on this game in the long run.
Agree. Bob in the tank.
I wonder what Bob's so far in the tank on. Or maybe he just took this opportunity for a restroom break. Oh, now we've moved phases.
All right. Eric's upkeep. Response to the Mana Crypt. Probably the same line we saw last turn.
Survey says...
Foundry Inspector. Yep.
Okay, now the top of Eric's deck could be his best friend or his worst enemy over the next couple of turns, I mean.
Oh, is that a good card?
That helps a lot. Now Bob's going to be like, come on. Didn't I just kill 2 Foundry Inspectors?
Indeed.
You got to pay 1 more. There we go.
That said, Bob gets to steal this one.
Yes, and untapped at that.
Right, as a blocker.
Right, which is an excellent feature. Unfortunately, Dak Faden is going to die in the process.
Fine.
But Spyglass, interesting. Would that there wasn't double sphere in play. That would be a fun draw, but it'll have to wait till at least next turn.
Whatever. All right, Dak Faden, steal Foundry Inspector. And Bob is a land draw away from Jace the Mind Sculptor. 2 land away from Inferno Titan? Is that true? No, 3.
This is Dak Fane doing basically his Rack and Ruin impersonation. It's kind of like a Rack and Ruin that you suspend until your opponent's turn.
Sounds about right.
All these spirits, though, Bob would really enjoy to be able to cast Inferno Titan or perhaps to draw Slice and Dice.
Oh, God.
How nice would Slice and Dice off the top be next turn?
Kind of insane.
That would feel pretty good.
Metamorph.
Ooh. Now Eric is rewarded for casting his turn 1 Metamorph with a late game Metamorph that could be quite relevant. Would you play it here and copy your Foundry Inspector? I don't think so. But it's tricky, right? Because you recognize what's about to happen in combat.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know how Eric... He can kill Dak by attacking. So he doesn't have to use his Ballista. He could what? He can use the Ballista to kill Bob's Foundry Inspector after it blocks?
It's interesting point. Bob's at 13. Exactly how Eric attacks right here is a bit tricky. You send 1 spirit, and Bob probably is comfortable trading Foundry Inspector for Ballista and Spirit to keep Dak, right? So that's almost certainly a non-starter.
Oh, Eric's attacking with all 3 spirits. And I think he's sending 2 of them at Dak. That I think is just happening.
Okay.
The question is whether he's attacking with the Ballista and giving I don't think he can attack with the ballista.
You can't attack with the ballista.
The Foundry Inspector block on ballista is just too good.
Exactly.
So you're not attacking with ballista. The real question is, are you using Metamorph pre-combat? In other words, I guess there's no reason to use Metamorph pre-combat.
I guess not, now that I think about it. You get to control when that Foundry Inspector dies. Right. So even if you want an Inspector, you don't give Bob the information by doing it pre-combat.
Precisely.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Send 2 spirits at Dak and 1 at Bob, and Bob is going to block the one coming at him, but whatever. Maybe that means you just send the 2 spirits at Dak?
No, because you need Bob to block. If you just...
Sure.
I mean, Bob's on a position here where he could not block at all.
Fair.
Because...
I don't think it makes sense for Bob. Like, if he's never going to block, then whatever. That's the Inspector's job is to block.
There's a possible line, though. If Bob, for example, pulls Slice and Dice off the top. No, because that damages the Inspector. Never mind. That I don't think there's actually any card that wants him to keep that Inspector. I
guess Inspector does have a second job, which is to make Sorcerer's Spyglass cheaper. It's a thing.
That's fair.
Bob does have an artifact.
I think Bob's just really looking at that Jace the Mind Sculptor in his hand and thinking, I want to get all the way to that.
All right. Inspector picked off a spirit. Dak died. This all went according to plan. Does Eric want to cash his ballista in to kill Bob's Foundry Inspector? Or does Eric want to play his Metamorph? Those are still the interesting questions on the turn.
Given how the game has unfolded, you know that Bob doesn't have... If Bob had Ancient Grudge, he wouldn't have played Dak last turn. He would have just cast Ancient Grudge, I believe.
I think if I'm Eric, I'm going to Metamorph Inspector.
I think that's probably correct. I think that gives him the best chance.
I think so
in
too.
The long run.
3 power and a mana.
And you can determine right now that Bob will have no other blockers or defense in play.
Yeah, I think I trade Ballista. I think I copy Inspector and then ping Bob's Inspector.
Oh, it occurs to me, it's crazy, but there is one other line, and that is Metamorph on Mana Crypt, add a counter to Ballista.
Wow!
Use the extra counter, so you're basically turning your Metamorph into a Ballista and a Mana Crypt this turn.
Wait, doesn't the Metamorph cost 4 with the Sphere, though? I don't think.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Sorry, you can only have.
I like the.
You can only have 2 mana after that.
Yeah, I don't think he can get to the 4 mana for Ballista. It's a clever thought, though.
If he only had a Foundry Inspector in play.
Exactly. That's why I copy the Inspector here. Card seems good.
I think that gives Eric the best chance for victory. Better mana, a renewed clock, in addition to these spirits. Assuming Bob taps Orchard next turn, even for the next 2 turns, which seems very likely, then this is a 2-turn clock. 6 next turn, again, assuming Bob taps it on his turn. 7 the next turn, possibly.
Yeah, I think it's a 3-turn clock. I don't think Bob would tap to give Eric that turn 2 kill.
Well, he's...
Ancient Grudge off the top.
Just what the doctor ordered.
Hold everything.
And we can cast it without giving Eric a token.
Main phase, Ancient Grudge, kill Foundry Inspector. Eric will be down to 2 spirit tokens. I liked Eric's line, but Bob is the one who's got more cards left in his hand. There's a lot of good draws for Bob. Like, all the lands are good for Bob, right? Any land would turn on Jace.
There's another thing to consider now. And that is Ancient Grudge can destroy Sphere of Resistance, which means any land off the top puts Inferno Titan into play through the Thorn.
Fair.
It's a high risk, high reward kind of play, and I don't blame Bob for not making it. Because this way he still has access to Jace pretty aggressively also.
He just gets more turns, right? Yeah. Knocking Eric's clock from 5 power to 2 power buys him draw steps.
So Eric's at 16. Has he lost 1 out of 4 or 5 Mana Crypt flips?
I believe he's lost 104.
104, okay.
It's currently his 5th turn.
It's his, okay, yeah, and he played it on turn 1, so. So Mana Crypt is treating Eric right this game. Mox Emerald obviously was a terrible draw. I would expect him to play both the cards in his hand. unless he wants to simply bluff certain things. But so he's going to keep an emerald in his hand, wagering that
there's some value in having a card in his hand.
Right.
Also, the Trinister costs 5.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm still thinking that everything from his costs 1 more. Like they're both thorns and they're all creatures. That's obviously my mistake.
You're doing loadsome golem math.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
all artifacts.
So Bob's probably just on flashback grudge on Eric's turn here. I mean, Fire Spout, yes, is an answer to spirits, but it's one that he doesn't need right now.
Yeah, he can take 2.
In fact, aren't we on end step Ancient Grudge here? Just wait and see what Eric does.
I mean, the other option Bob has is to cast his Spyglass, see what that card is that Eric's been holding all this time.
Oh, and turn off that Mana Crypt. Not Mana Crypt. Turn off, what am I trying to say? Ratchet Bomb in the future. Future Ratchet Bomb.
Yeah, he may have nightmares about the Ratchet Bomb out of you. Jesus.
Oh, geez. I apologize to Bob after that game.
Did you?
Yes.
Because
that was just ridiculous. There's no calling for that.
Yeah, I like Bob's line. I think leaving up Ancient Grudge is better than casting Spyglass.
Eric
almost got him to play that Spyglass by holding a card in his hand, though.
That's smart. Now see here we are. If Eric plays a 3 toughness or less creature, which is basically every creature that isn't a Ravager right now, then Firespout just gets to trade with this turn, basically.
And collect the spirits.
I take that back. Firespout costs 5, and a Revoker undoes that math that I just did.
Huh. Well, he can flash back Ancient Grudge and stuff, though.
Right. Also, Bob's going to be a little bit annoyed that Eric draws a flimsy creature that he can't just Firespout away next turn.
I think he's happy. Like, the Revoker comes down, Bob goes end step Grudge, untap, Firespout everything.
Well, it's the same Firespout as it was last turn, though. It's just Firespout for 2.
No, you grudge a Thorn or a Sphere.
Oh, I see. Okay. I was mistaken on what you were referring to the grudge on. Absolutely. Okay, that's a good line. And it furthers his plan of getting to Jason Inferno Titan.
Right.
Eric's going to announce the Mox Emerald that he was sandbagging last turn.
Yeah, it's a 3-mana Revoker. It's clearly the correct play for Eric. He's going to get max punished by I think, one of Firespout.
Well, this is one of those scenarios where Eric can't beat. There's a number of cards that Eric just can't play around at all, right?
Right, for sure.
When you're down to just Revoker in your hand in this stage in the game, it's all down to what Bob has access to and can execute.
Yeah, you name Mox Ruby here. Oh, Bob might want to respond by tapping for mana. It doesn't really matter. He's okay with tapping his Orchard.
Both players are well aware of the games that are afoot here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bob's just going to go ahead and respond. Everybody knows what's about to happen in that regard. Well, actually, Eric didn't know what the target would be, but he's not surprised to see that.
Right.
And now Bob gets to have the nice synergy between Orchard and spells that kill creatures, which is
Orchard
tap the Orchard,
give
you that spirit, and then kill it, which you can frequently do with Inferno Titan and Firespout and Slice and Dice out of this deck.
I like how Bob killed the Sphere because he has creatures in his hand he would like to cast.
Yes, duly noted.
He is now...
That Inferno Titan is coming down next turn.
It's going to be a big game. Well, yeah. I mean, he's 1 mana away, but as soon as he draws a land...
If he had drawn a land right there, it would be... Oh, he has to kill the Revoker first. But...
Yes.
That Nature's Claim is also just a super card. How huge would an early Wasteland have been this game? Yeah. Bob has now tapped that Orchard for a color of mana he could not otherwise produce 3 times.
Well, and tapped it 6 times.
Yeah.
5 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bob's got this game at this point. I don't know what Eric can draw that can't be Nature's Claimed, and Bob is at the point where he can cast his Jace. He's 1 mana from casting his Inferno Titan, and Eric's board is no creatures, no pressure, no cards in hand. That Fire Spout sweeps everything away, and yeah, Eric is going to have to top deck amazingly.
I'm with you. The only thing I can think of that would be even remotely threatening long term is a Hangerback Walker.
Fair. Soul Ring.
Just like it would. Yeah, it would leave something present, but that's nope. And Eric sees the writing on the wall here. I wouldn't be surprised to see a concession once Inferno Titan hits the stack.
There's
and
the
here
land.
It comes.
Land number 6. Who cares about Thorn of Amethyst? Who cares about Trinisphere?
That's
I'm
right.
going to summon my 6-mana creature and kill you with it.
Who knew that all along the proper plan against shops was to just bring in Titans?
It's crazy. Yeah, you see, this is why people like Oath against Workshops. The ability to hardcast these creatures is very relevant. There's so many ways to trade. Didn't work against you, but Bob's going to take the first W in this matchup. Like, I don't even think Eric could stack his deck and win from here.
Worth noting that Phyrexian Metamorph would be an interesting scenario right here. But he only has 1 left in his library. Yeah. No surprise there.
Top decks Ancient Tomb and scoops him up. So Bob Maher takes the first W. These guys are playing best 2 out of 3 matches. So they're going to go get their B decks. If you're watching us live, you can check out the deck lists in chat and see what these guys are going to be playing. We know from before that Bob has his Shops deck queued to come second. And what does Eric have? Oh, Eric has a Young Pyromancer deck. He's got his sort of blue stew queued up. That's what the matchup will be right after these messages. Stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back with the continuation of Bob Maher versus Eric Froehlich.
Need the latest Magic the Gathering singles for